Hello, and welcome to The Unseen. It's time for real conversations with real people, breaking down the world of education.
Welcome to The Unseen, our first podcast, season 1. Really excited to be here joining you this morning. My name is Cesar Roman. I am Director of Community Engagement with My School Options. Want to welcome my colleague here today and have her introduce herself.
Hello, community. My name is Chantelle Edwards. I am the Outreach and Advocacy Coordinator for My School Options. I am joining Cesar's army of advocates out here in the choice movement. We are happy to be bringing this podcast to you today to dive into the unseen topics of education. As we were deciding on how to start this podcast and what to call it, we decided on the unseen as a team because there are so many unseen or behind the scene or best kept secrets to education. And we want to shed light on that. We want everybody to have access to the same information, just like we want all children to have access to the best education possible for them.
And the number one thing that we continue to see over and over is the fact that folks just don't know what they don't know. So there is a consistent lack of awareness when it comes to the conversation of education, when it comes to what's available out there for you and your family, and how can you best use an education to empower yourselves and to make sure that your children are set up and prepared to be the very best in the world. So we chose the unseen as a starting point because what we hope to do is give you a 360-degree view of the education landscape, not only in Indiana, but with some thought partners around the country. We really want to get you a full view on what's going on in education. We want to talk to you about how it is that this movement began. How did it all begin? And we'll talk about that.
Before we dive into that, Mr. Cesar, how about you tell us how you came to join the choice movement, and then we'll circle back around to how the topics we're going to talk to our community about.
So I've always been a person that fights for the underdog. I remember as a kid watching any team that was set to or not predicted to win. That's who I would root for. So I've always cheered on the little guy. And I've always been someone that has been passionate about the place where I live, my community. And my journey began some 15 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, in East Chicago, Indiana, where after graduating college, I took over some family businesses and began to reinvest back in my community. I come from a community where a lot of people go away and never come back. I chose a different route. I chose to come back to the community where I was raised and make sure that I created some sort of impact for it. And so after running businesses for about a year, I was approached by a gentleman that wanted to run for mayor of the city of Chicago. And it wasn't an easy task at all. Actually, he was the underdog. And it took him quite some time to convince me that this was actually something that I wanted to invest and put some time and energy in. But after much thought, and I decided that this was something that I really wanted to invest in and make a difference in my community. So I began what was a process of being involved in my community and in politics for well over a dozen years or so. After getting sort of burnt out by the process, I decided that I needed to take a different direction. I was approached and asked to to recommend some people to come into the world of education, and I knew nothing about it. And so for me, that wasn't something that I was really comfortable with. So I decided to educate myself. I decided to invest and try to understand a little bit what it was that they were asking me to do, right? And so when I remember going on the website and of this organization that they asked me to look into. And the first time I looked at it, I saw little kids that reminded me of me. They were kids from my neighborhood, from my community. And I'm raised to the belief that education is the foundation to better your life.
Right.
My parents were consistent on that message. And so looking at those children, I knew that this was the effort that I needed to invest in. And so that began my journey.
So for me, I was born and raised in Fort Wayne, single parent household for the most part. And the one thing my mom said when I was in kindergarten, maybe even before kindergarten, was that I was going to go to Concordia Lutheran High School. At the time, not really knowing what that meant, but to her, it represented the best in the city. And she always wanted the best for me when it came to education. And then as time went on, the other thing I heard repeatedly was that I would go to college. She didn't care what college I went
That's
to.
right.
She didn't care what I majored in, but I did have to go and I had to
Keep
graduate.
going.
Um, so A was never good enough if an A plus was in sight. A B was never better. It was never good enough. She pushed me, and that has shaped a lot of who I am today. And now, years later, I have been in the nonprofit sector myself in several different capacities, but it's all about serving the people. It's all about getting behind the purpose and the passion of an organization that you can believe in. And as a mom, it definitely hits home every day what I do, and that this work matters not just for Fort Wayne, not just for Indiana, but it impacts my household. And I'm shaping the lives of future leaders, and that the best education possible is not only, they don't only deserve it, but they should demand it. Our kids definitely need that empowerment to understand that they're worth it.
Hmm.
And so for me, when I met you and heard what the mission of My School Options is, I signed up, and it's simply to improve the quality of education for all Indiana students. And it can't be any more simple than that. And why wouldn't you want to join up a cause that supports the quality of education for all Indiana students being improved? And so here we are today, discussing this podcast and getting this
Hmm.
thing created. So why don't you tell the community what they can look forward to hearing about over the next several episodes?
Yeah, so we're really excited to really present a whole scope and a wide scope on the world of education. So in the next several months, we'll be talking about just that. We'll be talking about the birth of the choice education movement. We'll be discussing and really hearing from folks in communities who share their stories. In particular, we will be talking to teachers. We also will be talking about some of the giants of our movement, some of the people that have been fundamental and have been there from the beginning or have been instrumental in making sure that children have choices and options. And then we'll be also talking about the union effect on the choice and option community and how that is that the unions impact choice education.
Okay. So that is what you all can look forward to hearing from us. And we want to just tell you a little bit more about how this journey began and when Indiana's choice history started. So correct me if I'm wrong, Caesar, but the choice movement goes all the way back to early 2000s, right?
Yeah, in 2001 actually is when the first Indiana's first charter school law was passed. So roughly almost 20 years ago now, right?
Can you believe it?
Yeah, no, and is one of the things I like to say is that as we all know, time waits for no one,
Right.
and we got really 13 years to get our children prepared and ready. So we cannot wait, right? And so it is with a sense of urgency that time passes by. So the movement began in Indiana in 2001. Um, Carried on, and there has been some really comprehensive reform policies that have taken place, in particular in 2011, where we saw the voucher program created in Indiana. We saw the charter school expansion and some teacher quality evaluations and pay merit policies passed during that year. But since then, the movement has been and continues to grow. Education in Indiana is in the forefront of doing some very exciting things that do create some areas of our state where we have significant choice and options for families. At the same time, we also have pockets of our state that have very little to no choice. We do have some work that needs to be
Don't we always?
right, and which is why we continue to make sure that every day we fight for families to make sure that they know that they have options and choices available.
So my school options was born out of that timeline. So how long have we been around? Let's let the community know.
So my school options was created some 4 years ago out of a need, again, to raise awareness that there was even actually school options available to families and communities. So my school options was created as a website, an information resource website that allows families to look at every school choice option available to them in their community. And by that, we mean every school choice option: public, charter, private. Any option that is available in your local community can be seen on the My School Option site. After that, what we've done is we really looked at the My School Options as the community outreach team that goes around communities all across Indiana and makes sure that folks know that there is education options, gives them some tools that can allow them to use education as a vehicle to empower them so that they can make sure that they are preparing their children for a brighter future.
Okay, so family, we have Lauren Hodge here with Ed Choice, and we're going to just jump right in with you, Lauren. And we'd like for you to share with us how you came to join the choice movement.
Well, I think the choice movement I was the product of to begin with. I was able to be born into a family that afforded me opportunities for a myriad of schooling options. By the time I graduated from law school, I had had public education, private education, religious education, and kind of everything in between, except for homeschooling. And so I had personally experienced what a difference that made. My connection into Indiana's choice movement and the national choice movement really came, though, when I was working as a prosecutor with juveniles. And I realized how important fit was in education when I would deal with kids that perhaps had a lot going on at home or had some other situations that were happening. And so they'd get kicked out of the Indianapolis public school system to go where? And so I started using EdChoice as a resource to learn about the programs and see if we could get them into other schools so that they could further their education and become, wonderful, wonderful people and wonderful citizens.
Can you share a little bit about EdChoice?
Sure. So, EdChoice, we're a nonprofit. We have the intellectual legacy of Milton Friedman, and we are based in Indianapolis, Indiana. Our mission is to advance educational freedom and choice for all as a pathway to successful lives and a stronger society. Simply put, we believe that it shouldn't matter where you're born and what your zip code is to determine what school you go to, and that every child is unique, and finding the right fit of school for each child shouldn't be a matter of circumstances. It shouldn't be because you have the right amount of money or influence or power. Um, every child matters, every choice matters, and we believe that parents are capable of making those choices. So at EdChoice, we're a nonprofit, and we have a couple of different things that we focus in on doing. We have a research department, which is phenomenal and has been doing state specific research, national research for years. We also have a training and outreach team that helps cultivate these amazing trainings for parents, for lawmakers, for influencers, fact finding trips, parent working retreats, everything from that you can possibly think of. They're always being very creative. We have a communications team who helps us understand and disseminate our message in the best way possible through a myriad variety of platforms. We have our state team, which I'm a part of, which is actually going out into the states, working with local partners, one on one, and working towards a more free society.
So, speaking of the states team, tell us a little bit more about how you think Indiana fits into the national landscape, or maybe what the biggest differences are with Indiana being in the forefront of this movement.
Absolutely. So Indiana is one of the first states to pass the voucher law in the nation, and this was
Woohoo!
woohoo is right. This was for the for those who are listening that might know Milton Friedman. This was kind of his keynote idea, right? That you should be able to receive the public funding. Dollars for your child to be used as you see fit, right? And that's exactly what vouchers enable us to do. Indiana has served as kind of a benchmark in so very many ways of what choice means for the ecosystem of schools, what it means for student achievement, what it means for parental involvement, civic values, recidivism rates. What I really see as Indiana being is one of those guiding examples to the nation writ large about its ability to have choice in an ecosystem and be really a fantastic success story. It's one of the ways, as I always tell people, Indiana is an example of how something can be done. It's not the only way that things can be done. We, of course, have things like education savings accounts in other states, tax credit scholarships in other states. States are getting very creative on how they deploy choice. And so Indiana is one of those guiding examples, though, of what it means and how it can mean, what it can mean for your society.
Can you tell us a little bit about what it looks like to have a place with less choice or no choice as to compare to Indiana, as to compare maybe to a place that has more robust choice and options for families?
Absolutely. So, one of the things that I do with the state team is work in a variety of states that are at different levels of their choice movement, right? And
Right.
so, when we look at those states that have less choice or even no choice, it's kind of like starting at the very beginning of even having the conversations with parents, with community leaders, with pastors, with special interest groups to say this actually exists. Um,
It takes a village, right?
it does take a village, and one of the things that I have seen being in this movement is that so often parents are told, we know what's best for your child, we know what's best for your child, we know what's best for
Hmm.
your child. There's almost a reworking into the mindset of, no, wait a minute, I know my
Hmm.
kid, I know what they need, and yes, I should be able to make that choice. um, and so to your comment about it takes a village, it does take a village of perspectives and communities coming together to really start questioning, is this working? Is my child getting the best that he or she needs? And if not, why should I be prohibited from seeking it elsewhere? And so it all kind of starts with um, challenging the status quo. One of our researchers, Mike McShane, calls it, he had a wonderful piece, calls it a million little mutinies, because that's what it is.
Perfect. Yeah. Couldn't be a better name.
Exactly.
Just thinking about what you just said, it is a real thing to need to empower those families that don't understand what it is to have options. Um, what do you think the biggest way we can help those families is?
I think it starts with conversations and education. Um, I don't care what your background is. I have not met a parent who does not want better for their
Mm,
child.
yes.
Um, that is one of those things I have found to be universally true. And so when we're talking about um, how to empower parents, I think it starts with letting them know there are options, letting them know that they can do these things. I mean, Indiana's had the voucher for a number of years, and still we run into parents that say, well, I can't afford that. I don't make that much money. Let's have a conversation about it.
Right. You don't
How
have to.
exactly,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. And so many of these programs as well are focused towards low income and special needs,
Mm-hmm.
educating them to know that there is something else out there. I think is that first bold empowerment step.
I always think that education is such a complex subject for us, especially, I mean, no matter at what level you are at, to engage that conversation, to understand it fully, and to use it as a tool to really help you drive your child's future forward is ever so complicated. I almost compare it to any subject, right? Like, say, insurance. If you go in to buy insurance, you tend to just follow the lead of whoever's selling you the insurance. You tend to take somebody else's word for it. And I think that that's what we do in education is that we don't know the conversation. So we tend to believe in others to help us find that way, right? But as Lauren is mentioning, right, Lauren, I mean, it is really a powerful tool that when parents use it, and as we always talk about, right, Chantel, is parents know their children best,
That's
right,
right.
and so taking it from the perspective of knowing your child best, understanding and feeling comfortable in the conversation of education. That enables you to begin to see education as a tool of empowerment. And I think that that is one of the key components to engaging parents and to making sure that they are feeling comfortable when speaking to educators, when speaking about education.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that to add to your point there, Caesar, I think it, uh, it's scary to challenge that first conversation, right? Because the moment you have to sit there and say, "This I know more or I know my child better or I don't think this is working," is to challenge the very institution that you've put your faith in.
Right.
That's part of that struggle, right?
Hmm.
That's why when we talk about a million little mutinies, it's the people who have said no, no, wait a minute, I trust myself, right? And so when we talk about that part of parent empowerment, I think that it's so critical to also bolster the parents to make them realize that they are smart. They are capable. They do know their children. I mean, every parent I know knows when a certain year or a certain grade or a certain classroom is not working. That
Mhm.
child comes home
Mhm.
Hmm.
sad
Yeah.
and upset, and you see all sorts of manifestations. But teaching parents to also trust that because it's a big institution to go against, and it's scary when you say it may not be working.
Right.
Well, we know that you are out and about in all kinds of states. So, what is one piece of advice you would give a parent, regardless of where they're at, if their state is in choice infancy or has been in the game for a while or they are fighting to even get their state to recognize it? What would you tell any of those parents? What would be your biggest piece of advice?
Education is power. Um, no matter what stage you are in, it is all about learning what's happening with your schools, what's happening with your school boards, what's happening with the choice movement writ large. Um, and the only way to do that is to become educated on these issues, which means talking to parents. It means talking to groups like Ed Choice, or if you're in those states, give us a call. If you're looking to learn more information, give us a call because we can connect you with state partners who are working in this movement. If you want to know, where your movement is in your state, or you want to know simply more information about how these things work, the biggest place to begin is to learn what's happening in that state, how you can be involved, and where you can best lend your voice and your actions.
Great. We thank you so much for joining us, Lauren. We will be asking all of our guests as they join our podcast this final question, and this will end our time with you. So, what is your why? What has brought you to become, as Caesar likes to say, a foot soldier in this choice movement?
I think it's my why is that every child matters. Um, every child has the innate potential to do phenomenal things. And so, why am I in this work? It's because I believe that every single child can succeed, can be a phenomenal, productive member of this society. And that's why we need to bring this around. This is why we need the choice. This is why we need to empower parents and empower families so that they can be as successful no matter of your income, your background, your socioeconomic level. Every child matters.
Lauren, thank you very much. We thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being on, and I wish you all the best.
Same to you. Take care.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
As we conclude this episode, and thank you, community, for joining us, how we have chosen to end every episode is to give you some food for thought as we leave you. So, as we shed light on the unseen topic of the educational landscape in Indiana and in our country today, here's my closing food for thought. It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men, by one of my favorite historical figures, Frederick Douglass. And how more fitting could that quote have been from many years ago to what's going on in our country and in our communities? We have to focus on building strong, educated, dedicated, and loyal citizens through our children. And I think that that is the biggest piece and factor into continuing to develop and sustain a strong and diverse educational landscape.
So I'm to the belief that education is the civil rights um, issue of our time. I believe that there exist inequalities across, and it really largely depends on your socioeconomic status or the zip code in which you live. And I find that to be an injustice to our communities and to our children. And I find that with that, we are not doing them the right. We're not doing them right. We're not preparing them to go out in the world and compete and make sure that they carry on forward and make sure that they make the lives of their children better than their lives were. And I think that until we really, really wrap our hands around the inequalities that exist in education, then we will always continue to have this fight.
Thank you for joining The Unseen. Get involved. Find us at myschooloptions.org or on Facebook or Twitter.